everybody, it's Jay Roby bringing you Day 4 Canada Chess 2014 coverage. We've had a really exciting day today. We're going to take a look at a couple of games. First up on the docket here is Mamedyarov versus Andreykin. Andreykin's playing the black pieces and Mamedyarov is playing the white pieces. Now you remember from yesterday's video when we looked at the stats from these players, Andreykin has a very healthy win percentage as black, so it was going to be a good game coming into this. And we actually see him try to use some of Anand's strategies because once again we get into a Slav structure here. And if you remember back, that's of course where Anand was able to beat Mamedyarov in those lines. And in fact, today Mamedyarov says, I'm going to play a different line, and he plays knight to c3. If we think back to the Anand game, what happened was he played knight to f3, followed by this sequence of moves leading up to queen to c2. So we're going to get into a different structure today than that. He plays knight to c3 instead. Black plays knight to f6. White pushes the pawn up now to e3, and now black plays pawn up to a6. And in fact, we get into just a couple of series of moves. The players are getting ready to jockey for central control here. Nothing too super special, but at this point in the game here now, we're going to start to see some fighting for the center. So from here now, Mamedyarov pushes the pawn up now to e4, attacking the pawn on d5. Black captures, white recaptures with the knight, and from here now black pushes the pawn up now to c5, attacking the pawn on d4. To deflect from this for a moment, Mamedyarov comes in, snags up the knight on f6, black recaptures, and from here now he takes the pawn now on c5. Black does not immediately take right away. He pushes the pawn up to a5. Now this looks very similar to a move that was played by Anand against Mamedyarov the other day. Remember, this is obviously stopping any kind of action coming in from the a file, but more importantly is preparing a square for the dark square bishop on b4. And Mamedyarov had a lot of problems with that setup in his game versus Anand, because that dark square bishop, if you remember back to that game, there was no pawns here that could kick it, and it was covering the e1 square very well, so Mamedyarov could never bring a rook to e1 to contribute to central play. So his opponent Andreykin is trying to kind of create that similar kind of structure here. The only problem was today that Mamedyarov learned from his mistake the other day. So from here now he gets ready to fianchetto that white square bishop. So, you know, very similar to the game he played against Anand. We're going to get into a similar structure here with a fianchetto bishop here on g2. Black comes in, takes a pawn now on c5, and he does fianchetto the bishop. Black castles, and now white castles. And from here now, we see a pawn push from Andreykin. Now, when I first looked at this game this morning, even without computer analysis, I was like, I wasn't sure what this move was all about. Like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I mean, the engine analysis doesn't show any kind of advantage for white or anything like that. But if we go back a move, I kind of like this move a little bit better here. Rook over to e8. The main reason being is keeping the pawns connected here. You know, the pawn island's intact, the pawns are defending the pawns, and it's kind of a good developing move. Play could continue like bishop to d2, bishop to d7, bishop to c3, and now bishop to c6, and you know, it's a nice playable structure for both sides. But Andreykin wanted to get the pawn pushed up forward here a little bit to e5. Mamedyarov responds bishop up now to g5, attacking the knight there on f6. Black lifts the rook up now to a6, bringing it into the action, giving it a little bit of influence along this rank here. Mamedyarov plays rook over now to e1. So now we can see that you know, this rook being able to be on e1 is very, very important for any kind of central battle. You know, you want to have your rook supporting your pieces here. There is no dark square bishop yet on b4, so this dark square bishop can't prevent that from happening. So from here now, black plays the rook over now to e8. And Mamedyarov plays his queen up now to c3. So we have three attackers now on the pawn on e5. That's a heck of a lot of pressure. Black has to do something about that. Black elects to push the pawn up to h6 now, attacking the dark square bishop, basically deflecting attention away from this pawn for the short term. Mamedyarov takes the knight there on f6, and black recaptures with the pawn. Now this is a very logical capture here, like, and we're going to talk a little bit about this rook here for a second, but the reason why the pawn was used here is because it's giving this pawn here on e5 another defender. More importantly, that defender is a pawn. So you don't have to contribute a full piece to defend this pawn. So in this case, doubled up pawns is fine for black. There's no big, you know, weaknesses created by this capture here. And if we go back a move, let's see here, if we go back to this position, you know, rook captures is playable. If you plug it into your engine analysis, it is playable. It doesn't look very good, but it is playable. So it doesn't really kill the black position to capture with the rook. But in this position, the strongest move is just to capture with that pawn to give this pawn here another defender on e5. So from here now, play continues. Pawn thrust now from Mamedyarov up here to b4. So we're attacking that dark square bishop. He's basically saying, get this bishop out of here. I don't want to deal with any kind of bishops on this side of the board. I've learned my lesson from Anand. Get it out of here. So that's exactly what happens. Black pulls the bishop back to f8. And from here now, Mamedyarov plays his knight up to h4. And look at this nice little square that this gives knight access to here on f5. We can see that the king position here for black is starting to get a little weaker. Obviously, there's some open access to the king. So, you know, I know there is the saying that a knight on the rim is dim, but, or I say grim, but in this case, it makes really good sense. From here now, black does take the pawn on b4. White recaptures, and now black brings the bishop now to e6, a much more active square. Pretty much all of black's pieces are developed here. This bishop is looking a little strange here on f8. White's piece coordination, though, is just a little bit slightly better. This bishop here on g2, this is the silent killer. If you just watch the influence of this bishop throughout the game, you're going to see just how important it is to control long diagonals on the chessboard as the middle game progresses towards the end game. All right, so we've got a couple attackers on this pawn. What does white do about that? White pushes the pawn up now to c5, taking that pressure off. Black responds by pushing the pawn to b6, attacking that pawn, and Mamedyarov just elects to push the pawn forward one more time here to c6. So we got a pawn on the 6th rank. This pawn here is going to be a beautiful little piece for white as the game moves forward. It's quite far advanced, and it's going to be able to work with the other white pieces to create a lot of threats here for black. From this position now, rook goes to a4, attacking the pawn on b4. Mamedyarov just defends, rook over to b1. From here now, black plays rook over to d8, and white now puts the queen along the same light square diagonal as this light square bishop here on f3, giving this pawn a lot of defense. From here, black brings the rooks down now to d4, so it's attacking the pawn here on b4. Mamedyarov does not panic in this situation. He plays knight up now to f5, giving the knight an even better post in the position. From here now, rook does take the pawn. White captures the rook there. Black recaptures, and from here now, queen goes to h5. Now in this position, king to h7 was played, which is fine. It's an okay move. In fact, some of you might be wondering, well, can't you just take the knight here, and get this beautifully perched knight out of the position? Unfortunately, it doesn't work out good for black. Let's just take a look at it. If the bishop comes in and takes that knight, queen's going to recapture, and take a look at what the queen has access to now. The queen has access to the d7 square. The light square bishop, the silent little deadly bishop here, is maintaining defense of the pawn here on c6. This is just a world of hurt for black, because after rook to d4 to kind of protect against any kind of queen to d7 nonsense, well, the queen just takes the pawn here on f6. So it's definitely not good to do that. So king to h7 was played instead, and that's fine. From here now, rook over to d1. So the rook is coming in now, giving access along this this file here. The bishop's still supporting this pawn. We've got this knight on this beautiful perch here on f6, and we've got the queen. So white's building up pressure in this position. From here now, queen falls back to c8. We've got two attackers on the knight here now. Knight falls back to e3, and black now pushes the pawn up now to f5. And this is actually a pretty big blunder here for black in the position. Basically, he's opening up even more access to the king, and he's going to allow pieces to contribute to the attack a lot better. A stronger move in this position would have been pushing the pawn to e4. Now, this looks like kind of a subtle little move, but look at what it does. It takes away the influence of the light square bishop. It's no longer defending the pawn here on c6, and now it doesn't matter really what white does in this position, that pawn is going to drop. So it was definitely a stronger move that could have been played in that position. But unfortunately, f5 was played, and let's watch how that transpires here. So from here, bishop now to d5. So basically this light square bishop here is getting activated. It's getting stronger. From here now, the bishop is not taken. If the bishop is taken in this position, it just creates a lot of problems, because the knight perches in here to d5. The rook can slide back to b2 for an example, but look at this. attack on the queen that we have here, or attack on the king that we have here, and it's just going to lead to a lot of problems. So obviously that bishop is not going to be taken. From here the pawn is pushed though to f4. Mammadara peels his knight back to c2, attacking the rook there on b4. Rook moves over to a4, and from here now the pawn drops on e5. So we see, the black position is just starting to collapse a little bit here under the pressure. Bishop to g7 is played, attacking the queen there on e5. From here, Mammadara just hits the check first with the light square bishop, that pesky light square bishop, who was a lot quieter in the beginning of the game, is now becoming quite the monster on the board. King goes to g8, and from here now the queen takes a pawn now on f4. So we have just a lot of problems. Black's position is just crumbling here. Pawn push to f5, attacking the light square bishop, and he doesn't worry about that. He just pushes the pawn up now to c7. Now we've got this monstrous pawn here, one rank away from promotion. We've got it protected by the queen, and we have the rook sitting here on d1, ready to deliver a check on d8 at any time. This is just a very, very difficult position for black. From here, black tries to take the light square bishop with the rook. White simply hits a check now on the king, and the king moves to f7. Another big mistake from black in this position. If king would have went to h7 instead, look at what follows. The rook takes the queen, but then black's rook takes the queen, and from here the pawn recaptures and the bishop captures, and this is not so easy. This pawn is here on c7, but how is white going to capitalize on that? Because it's on a dark square. We've got a dark square bishop. It's definitely not easy to see a clear path for white in this position. However, that wasn't played. It was king to f7, and this opens up a lot of tactical ideas for white now. White activates the queen even more, bringing it to d6. We've got a lot of problems. That queen's got to get off that square before the rook captures it, and from here now we have a rook check. King peels to g6. And now queen goes to c6, ready to protect that pawn as it goes towards promotion. And the rest of the game here is just basically, that's it right there. At this point in time, black realized it was all over, because if play were to continue from this point, well, what would happen is bishop takes the white queen, rook takes the black queen, and there's nothing that black's going to be able to do to stop the promotion here, because once the rook checks, bishop recaptures, and we have a queen, and it is game over. So it was a really good game. I enjoyed going over it. I think Mammadara has definitely learned some lessons there from his loss against Anand, and he played very solidly throughout the game, and the piece coordination was very, very well. I really, really enjoyed this bishop that was perched here on g2. I thought that was a great piece throughout the entire game. So I'm looking forward to your comments on this one, but let's go now take a look at the Aronian game and see what happened there. Alright everybody, let's get on to the Aronian game now. Aronian's playing white versus Mr. Svidler, who's playing black. And I got to be honest with you guys, this game is a gong show. I am going to flip through the first 20-ish moves here in the game to save a little bit of time for going over the end of the game, and I'm going to try to do that as good as I can. Yeah, there is a bunch of inaccuracies in this game played by both sides. And the winner of the game, obviously we do have a winner, otherwise I wouldn't be putting it in the video, it's not the type of game that leaves a good feeling in your stomach after you look at it. Let's just say that. So I'm flipping through the first 21 moves here, because it's pretty much dead equal. Black does get a pawn there, but in return white gets a lot of activity for its pieces. So the engine analysis will show that it's pretty much an equal position dead on. So we're at move 21. And this is where things start to light up a little bit here. So from this position here, black plays the queen up to a3. And Mr. Aronian sacks a piece. He takes the pawn on f7 with his bishop, landing check. And this is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Let's just say that the sacrifice is not sound. Black can still defend and have a nice, pretty much dead on equal position. However, as the moves progress here, Mr. Aronian is going to start to create some complexity here that Mr. Svidler has to deal with. And unfortunately, Mr. Svidler is unable to deal with the complexities that the positions create. But it's not all Mr. Svidler that makes inaccuracies as the play goes here. White also makes some tactical mistakes as well. Okay, so we get to this position here. Queen hits a check on b5, checking the king. Mr. Svidler unfortunately makes a little bit of an inaccuracy here. He plays queen over to d7, and this actually worsens the black position pretty substantially because once the queens come off, it forks the king and the knight. Now you might be saying, "Oh my gosh, there's a fork. You know, he's dropping a piece. It's all over." Unfortunately, it's not all over. This position is there's a slight advantage for white in this position, but it's not crushing. It's not game ending of any kind whatsoever. Because we got to remember, he sacked the piece to get into this line. So really, material here. White's up a pawn. But it's not a clear path to victory here. So if we go back, Mr. Svidler could have avoided, the problems here by playing king over to f8, and play could have continued pawn pushed up to e6, and then knight comes over to d6, and it would have been fine to play from this position. However, he did play queen to d7. This gave white some activity in the position. Okay, and we had this fork here. Pawn captures. Rook goes over to f8 now, and I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the rest of the moves here, leading up to some other inaccuracies from the players, because it's pretty much a pretty equal position. From here, I like this move actually quite a lot. This is preparing the pawn push here to f4 was preparing for a nice little post here for the bishop on e5. That bishop's going to be very strong in that position. It's not crushing for black, but it's definitely going to be strong. So bishop comes to e5 now. Solid foundation with a pawn on f4. This light square bishop's never going to be able to harass it. From here now, rook takes a pawn now on f7. Mr. Aronian does not trade rooks off at this point. Instead, he hits the check, defending the pawn here on d5. Actually, the pawn's already defended by the rook on d1, but the rook's in a better position there. From here now, rook swings over to e1. It's not tied down to defending that light pawn anymore. And rook goes over in front of the king now to e7. From here now, rook goes back to c1. Black doubles its rooks now on the 7th rank. And from here now, the dark square bishop attacks the rook on e7. Rook goes over to d7. Once again, Mr. Aronian does not want to trade the rooks off at this point. King peels to f8. And then d6 is played. And this is a nice little pawn move here to d6 because now this light square bishop can never harass that pawn again for quite a while. So now king goes over to g8. Mr. Aronian plays pawn up to h4. He's going to tuck his bishop in here onto g5. That's going to be a monstrous bishop. And from here, rook goes to f8 for black. From this position there, the bishop does go down to g5. King comes out to f7. And from here now, rook goes over to e1. So we've got double rooks now on the e file. The light square bishop can't mess with the pawn on d6. And we've got some threats in this position. From here now, black makes a mistake by playing bishop to c6. I am not going to show you why this was a mistake. You take a look in your engines and find out for yourself. It's not pretty. However, Mr. Aronian did not catch the opportunity that was given to him here, and instead pushes the pawn up to h5. From this position now, pawn push to a5, and if I go back a move here, and yeah, so let's just take a look at rook check here on e7. Let's just go back to there. h5 was played. Yeah, so instead of h5, we had rook to e7 check, which would have resulted in the following lines here, which would have been another strong winning line for white that Mr. Aronian missed. Instead, he pushes the pawn up to h5. From here now, black pushes the pawn to a5. Unfortunately, this wasn't a good move for black either. A better move would have been to take care. The play that would have resulted would have looked similar to the line where we had the fork of the rooks, but it's not as clear. So it would have been a little bit better there. However, a5 was played. From here now, rook hits the check now. King goes to g8. Another mistake. A better move in this position would have been simply to let's see here. or no, sorry, a better move for white in this position, I'm looking at my notes here as I'm going, would have been to take with the pawn here, which would have led to this position here, which was strong for white. However, that was missed. Instead, the rook check was hit here on e7, king peels off, and from here now we have some complexity building up in the position, and this is where black resigned. So it's a tough game to look through. You know, like, I mean, there's not really a clear path to victory here. There's kind of a you know, a bunch of inaccuracies on both sides, and I definitely recommend you take a look at this game on your own. Plug it into whatever engine that you use. Try to find out exactly what could have been done, and you know, you could spend a lot of time on this. Nonetheless, Mr. Aronian did come out with a win. I'm not particularly impressed with the win myself. I think that this doesn't bode well, I don't think, for Mr. Aronian moving forward. I think Mr. Svidler is really going to be unhappy with his performance as well when he takes a look at the game himself. This game was the last one to finish up today on the board, and so these guys definitely used the time as much as they could have. But I think this bodes well for the other players in the tournament, because if there were so many inaccuracies here on this game from both sides, I think it could be a good indication that they might not be in the right mindset to you know, perform very, very well as the tournament progresses. That's just my theory. I'm just going to go with that theory for now. Right now, I'm looking at some other players in the tournament who have been performing much better and producing some better results. So we'll have to go from there. So I'm going to put up a screen of the standings. That's where we stand right now. So take care. Thanks for watching the video, and we will see you next time.